Is this on yet? Yeah? Can everybody? Oh yeah, I can hear it myself. Sounds weird in here. I was going to say to people, if you're sort of sat around that middle part of the room, the sound can get a wee bit weird at times. So don't worry, it's a natural effect to this room. So feel free to shift as well if that's what happens. Anyway, my name's Frank Rafferty. I work for the Bluebell Arts down here. One of the things we were doing today around the town was we did a poetry trail around town with a few people performing bits of their work or reading bits of their work, and people from the general public were welcome to come along if they had something that they wanted to share as well. And before we get to the novel discussion event, we were meant to end the poetry trail here, but one of the stops we had planned to do wasn't available to us today, so we ended up here a bit earlier, and as they do, other poets drifted off and maybe found possibly in pubs nearby or somewhere else, who knows. But before we get to that, welcome to what's coming up. There's going to be two really good events in here tonight for Culture Night 2021. There is a novel discussion organised by Sue Divin, and that'll be a panel with 4 local novelists discussing their work, and then it'll be open to you to ask them any sort of questions. And I beg you, make them difficult. Make them work for it, you know. It's just but then there's going to be an event called Off the Page where 4 performance poets, spoken word artists from the Northwest will be performing some work for you. Short sets, about 12 to 15 minutes, I think. That'll be getting live streamed. And then there will be a short open mic where anybody is welcome to get up and share their work, whether you're a writer and want to share a bit of what you've been writing, or whether you're a poet who has something, or if you want to get up and sing a song or dance or anything, you know. Anyway, as I said, I'll sort of kick it off. The event that's coming up is called Off the Page, but I'm not going to be off the page at the moment because to be honest, I've been in here all day. Then I did the poetry trail, and I was out last night. It was a friend's 70th birthday, so I didn't get to my bed till quite early on. And I will be doing a bit later off the page, but for the time being, I won't be. So let's see. I'll kick it off with a friend of mine once said, when you're doing poetry, never make the introduction longer than necessary, and certainly no longer than the poem. But given that quite a few of the poems that I do were written for people like me, people with the attention span of a goldfish, the introduction to some of my poems are actually longer than the poems. I'd like to start off with one which it sounds as if it might be about an animal, and it's called Elephant. Everybody ignored the elephant in the room. Even after I had climbed up onto his back, sat in the howdah, and began to smash the furniture to pieces. Thank you. That's what I mean. See, very short. See, I like to lull people into a false sense of security. A few wee short ones. This is called Either. On being told by a woman that she could chat to a chestnut tree, or when someone else implied that he could speak with folk who've died, I tried to empathize and said, I can talk to my trousers. To date, they have not replied either. Okay. You'll know when I'm not off the page because I am of an age where I have to put on my specs. I sometimes forget that this is out of a wee book that someone was foolish enough to include some of my work in a few years ago. And this is one of these ones. It's about basically a lot of us, we grow up with a certain dialect, a certain accent, and sometimes along the way you discover that in the ears of other people, the way that you speak is not wholly approved of. So this is one about that kind of experience, and it's just called This Is the Voice. This is the voice, my ain. It was lost, but somehow I kept it, no matter the cost. It was lost. I had buried it under mountains of shite, and then I went off somewhere and tried speaking right. But it just didn't suit me. It left me tongue-tied. I was left feeling lousy, like somebody died. In my head, I was hurting. Something just wasn't clicking. My language, my culture had been getting a good kicking. As away it all started, with comics and books, and if I asked a question, I'd get one of their looks that said I was rubbish. I changed how I spoke, so all my teachers thought I wasn't a joke, because Scots were all stupid, drunk, mental, violent. I spoke in my new voice. I spoke and grew silent. I grew silent and weary. I felt a deep sense of shame. I spoke in my new voice. And then I came home. I stopped. I listened. For the first time in years, I still had an accent that moved me to tears. I stopped. And I listened without being prepared. I listened to people. And I liked what I heard. I stopped being frightened, being grammatically wrong. And I spoke in my own voice. No, I didn't. I sang. Cheers. I didn't really know I was going to be getting up at this point and doing anything, and I don't know if anybody else wants to at the moment, but I'll sort of keep it on that sort of level at the moment. This is I assume most people have guessed by now I'm not from around here. I'm what many of you refer to as a blow-in. I once asked somebody, when do I stop being a blow-in? And they looked at me and just went, you don't. So this is a wee poem called Bard. And I don't mean bard as in the poetic term. I mean as in being barred for some place, A penguin walked into a bar. Then the man hit the penguin with the bar again. I've told you before, he shouted. No books are getting into this club ever. You got that? Stop trying to be so effing clever. The wee penguin trudged off and went into a decline. That was Halloween, Glasgow, 1979. Right. I'm just filling time till everybody's here to get on this panel, really. So let's see what else. As I said, I didn't plan to be up here at this point. And one of the other reasons why even some things that I used to know quite well are not off the page is, for about 2 years, a good chunk of it, we've all been stuck in our houses. And you might have the intention of going, I'll write more poems, I'll learn them all off by heart. But the reality is I spent a huge chunk of it just sat in front of the telly watching box sets after box sets after box sets. And I'm sure I'm not alone having done that. But during the actual lockdown, see if I can remember this one off the top of my head anyway. I wrote a poem and I sort of dedicated to a fella I met a few times over the years, not so much lately. And I sent it to him and he said he loved it, stuck it on his Facebook page and stuff and said it had cheered him up no end. I didn't realise at the time that he was ill. So I sadly found out that he died a wee while after that for his daughter. But it's a poem, it's called My Granny. My Granny Made Me an Anarchist. But I cribbed the title for this fella's book, which was called My Granny Made Me an Anarchist and General Franco Made Me a Terrorist. So it's called My Granny Made Me an Anarchist for Stuart Christie. My granny made me an anarchist. That night she came up with my bail. She said, Frankie, son, always box clever. Never let them put you into their jail. Never let them know what you're thinking or that you plan their demise. When they stop you in the street, just keep smiling, and a smile always starts in your eyes. Read a lot, have many friends, enjoy talking, have a beer or 3, but never to excess. Experiment with whatever you want to, but keep in mind, more is rarely better than less. Have sex with whoever you want to, whoever takes your fancy or you to their bed. But try never to break any promises you've made and keep religion well away from your head. She was just a wee woman fae Springburn and she claimed that she didn't know very much. But when she went into the intricacies of anarcho-syndicalist thought, at first I thought she was speaking in Dutch. She said, there's a coming insurrection. You may not know when or where, but the why. That's all you can ever be sure of. This and the fact we all die. There's this world. There will no be another. We'll no be building new homes in the stars. Science fiction. Keep the emphasis on fiction. And politicians, they'll give you nothing but scars. They'll lie to you. They'll dupe you. Don't believe them or their facts of the matter. It's all lies. No matter what party they claim to stand for, they're in the same one. There's a few in disguise. Now, my granny never danced with Emma Goldman. She never drank with Bakunin, Rudy Rocker, or Lucy Parsons. But she taught me that revolt is a natural tendency in life. And a good case might be well made for arson. Direct action, said my granny, is necessity. The world can be whatever all of us create, beyond the decrees of parties and leaders. There can be no redress from the state. Government isn't there for the governed. It serves the interests of the rulers and the rich. The rest of us, we're just a game being played by people who never die in any ditch. Aye, my granny made me an anarchist that night when she came up with my bail. She said, Frankie, son, always box clever. Never let them get you into their jail. Thank you. That's fine, Kate. You might have to suffer more from me later. But
you can take 2 minutes if you want to top up tea and coffee, and then we're just going to go straight into the novel panel.
I should explain, I'll go and get some glasses because I realise I got juice up there. Bring any glasses up. And the tea, the coffee, and the juice is free. See the wee cans? There's a wee honest section to the side of that. You can throw something in.
That's very lovely of you.
On the left one. Good to see you, Claire.
Just a wee second for Brian to come back. Right, folks, I think we're almost ready. We'll give this a wee go. Thank you all for joining us tonight. If you've just landed in there, I'm supposed to be doing the reception desk as well, so just make sure you're signed in. You're very welcome to Word on the Street Part 2. This is the novel panel, and if you're joining us online, thanks very much for joining into the live stream as well. So we're here in the Gasyard, in the Drum. And my name is Sue Divin, and I'm joined by 3 fantastic novelists. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling slightly odd because when I read through their bios, they've written collectively at least 25 novels. So I feel a bit of a fraud here, sitting with one. But let me just start by introducing who we have on the stage here tonight for Culture Night. So to my left, we have Brian McGilloway. Brian McGilloway is a New York Times best-selling author of 11 crime novels. He was born in Derry, Northern Ireland in 1974 and currently works as an English teacher in Strabane, where he also lives with his wife and 4 children. And his latest novel in the Ben Devlin series, Blood Ties, which we'll be hearing a bit about in a minute, was released in spring 2021, while his previous standalone, The Last Crossing, was highly commended in Theakston Old Peculiar Crime Novel of the Year in 2021. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Thank you.
And you are allowed to clap, and stuff. Some of this stuff's quite impressive, And then Clare Allan. Clare is a best-selling author also from Derry. A former journalist, she published 8 contemporary women's fiction titles before changing genre to write domestic noir in 2018. And her debut thriller, Her Name Was Rose, has sold more than 250,000 copies. When not writing thrillers, she can be found penning romantic comedies under her alias of Freya Kennedy. Clare is currently working on a TV adaptation of her 2020 novel, The Liar's Daughter, with Hat Trick Productions, and as a story consultant for the new BBC cop drama, Blue Lights. Her 6th thriller, she tells me, is a tense against the clock drama and is scheduled for publication in January 2022. So please welcome Clare. And Dave Duggan almost needs no introduction in Derry, but we'll introduce him anyway. He is a novelist and dramatist living in Derry. He works in English and in Irish. His recent novels are Macaronic, Clólar Chonacht, is that right, more or less, getting there, in 2018, and Oak and Stone from Murdoch Books. Dave has 4 novels, including one in Irish, as well as dramas for the stage, radio and film. And I'm sure, even though he didn't put it in the bio, that there should be something mentioned about an Oscar nomination in there as well. The novels in fiction of different genres tell different stories of individuals caught in the sweep of public affairs. And hopefully we'll hear a wee bit more about them later on. And we'll be talking about his first novel. We're reminiscing back to The Greening of Larry Mahon. I'm Sue Devon. I've only published 1 novel, but I'm still well proud of the fact that I've published 1 novel. So thank you very much. So I'll be talking a wee bit about Guard Your Heart, and hopefully we'll have a bit of banter between us as well as we go along. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start one at a time and get each of you to read a bit from a novel, and then we'll go into a bit of conversation. And towards the end, you can be thinking up any questions at all that you want to ask to the panel. We're more than happy to interact around that. So Brian, I'm going to go back to yourself and start with yourself. And we're talking, I think, about Blood Ties tonight. Ben Devlin is back, and I love the intriguing strapline on the front of this. I haven't read this one. I did read The Last Crossing, and I loved it. But the strapline on the front is, how can a dead woman avenge herself on a killer 12 years after her murder? And I already want to know the answer, but I'm sure you won't tell me.
I won't. No, thank you, Sue, and thank you for organising this as well, and all the organisers on it. It's a fantastic idea. Can everyone hear me okay? Is that okay? Yeah, the strapline in the front is actually wrong, because it's one of those things, and this was the first time ever, the publisher designed the cover before I'd written the book.
Right.
And so I told them what the story was going to be about, and before I had written it, I kind of said, this happens 12 years. So basically the idea is that a body is discovered at the start of the book. Somebody's been murdered, and fresh blood is found at the scene. And when the police begin to examine the blood, they discover that the blood belongs to somebody who was murdered 20 years earlier. But when I first pitched it to them, I'd said 12 years earlier, so they put that on the cover. I then wrote the book, and I thought, no, 12 years doesn't work, it needs to be longer. They never changed the strapline. So that's one of the joys of being published. So they designed the cover for the book without actually having read the book or knowing what it was like, which is one of the other joys of publishing, I think, as well. So this was a book, that's kind of what it's about. What it's really about, I suppose, for me, Devlin was my first character, and he is probably very like me in that what's happening in his world is a reflection of what's happening in mine. And he is a bit of a punch bag and psychiatrist. He's a way for me to kind of work out how I feel about things. And in this book, it's set just during that first week before the last week, I suppose, before lockdown last year. And Devlin's father is dying, and his children have gone to university. And he's kind of struggling because in the very first Devlin, his child is 6 months old and his daughter's about 5, and everything's grand. And the books, Devlin has aged as time has passed and has aged with me. So I'm going to give you just a very short section. And to put this into context, his dad had been in a home. And knowing that lockdown was coming, they have got him out of the home and brought him to live with them. And one night he falls out of the bed, and Devlin and his son have to go in and help him. How long are your readings, by the way? I'm trying to work out, do I do 2 pages or 1?
You can do 2, it's grand.
Okay, I'll read quickly, if that's all right. I woke at around 3 a.m. with my dad calling for me. When I went into the room, he lay on the floor, one leg still caught in the sheets on the bed where he had fallen out. I rushed across to him as he protested that he was okay. But even as he did, I could see that he was unable to lift himself, his arms ineffectually pushing against the ground, one hand twisted in the duvet that had fallen off with him. I knelt down next to him and recognised his fear. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head. "I shocked myself, I think," he said. "I wasn't expecting to fall. I have a rail around my bed in the home." "Are you ready?" I asked. "Do you need a hand?" I looked up and saw Shane, his son, standing in the doorway, staring in disbelief at the sight in front of him. "Give me a hand with your granddad's legs," I said. "I can get up myself," Dad complained. "I'm not completely useless." "We've got it, Dad," I said, putting one arm under his back and cupping him beneath his armpit on the far side while I stretched my other arm across his chest. I lifted him, cradling him the way I had once cradled Penny and Shane, while Shane helped disentangle his foot from the sheet and pulled back the covers to allow me to place him back in bed. "Are you okay?" I asked him as I set him down, laying his head on the pillow. He shook his head, his eyes wet with tears that I knew to be in shame and which threatened my own resolution. "I shouldn't be doing this to you," he said, "not to any of you." "You're not doing anything, Dad," I said. "It's my job to look after you. You looked after me for long enough." But I could tell the reversal in roles hurt him. And if I'm being honest, mixed along with the sense of privilege in being able to help him, it hurt me a little too. After we got him settled, I went back into my room. "I don't know how you'd feel about it," Deb said, sitting at the edge of the bed now, all chance of a return to sleep gone. "But we have a bed guard up the stairs from Shane's old bed. It's still in the attic." I knew what she was talking about. When both Penny and Shane first moved from cot to bed, we'd bought a guard that slipped onto the mattress and sat up on the outside of the bed, a foot or so to prevent the children from falling out. Rather than dumping any of the children's things, we'd stored them all in case they should prove useful at some later date. Seemingly, that date was now. And so, just after 4 a.m, I found myself sitting in our attic. I located the guard easily enough in the corner alongside the panels of the dismantled cot and a folded playpen. There were boxes too of toys and games, of books and piles of photographs from before we used a digital camera or our phones to record family memories. I sat among the dust and looked through them. Penny as a baby with Deb's, the latter's face still swollen a little from pregnancy, her smile ablaze with this newfound joy the child had brought us both. Then of Shane, sitting in a walker, his small fist raised in a salute of seeming defiance to the camera, even as his grin suggested he was playing. There were pictures too of Frank, our old Basset, staring dolefully at the children, his tail raised in a mixture of joy at the attention he received and annoyance that his place in our affection might have been usurped by them. And there were christening pictures, including ones of my mother and father holding first Penny and then a few years later Shane. They hadn't changed much between the two images, despite the gap in years between the events. It was a shock then to realise how much things had changed since. The loss of my mother, my father's illness. It all seemed so sudden. For years we had seemed to be in some sort of happy stasis. As I recovered objects we'd once used to protect our children, to now protect my parent, I felt as if I might suffocate with the relentlessness with which time was passing, and longed just for a few moments for time to set itself in abeyance and give me a chance to catch my breath. So,
Thank you. It always seems to me it's really important to actually hear a writer read a wee bit of their book. You know, it puts a real sense across when you hear it in the voice of the author of it, you know. And really intrigued about how you keep writing books as well that have the same protagonist and seeing that family structure. Maybe you can tell us a tiny bit about that before I move to Clare.
Quite badly. I'm really bad at keeping notes on things. And I know, particularly kind of writing classes and stuff, I'm sure you've kind of heard this, the write backgrounds to all the characters, and you should know where they went to university, and you should know who their childhood friends are. I barely know the characters' children's names. In the same way, I barely know my own children's names because there's 4 of them and I keep mixing them up. But I remember with the first book, Shane in the very first book is 6 months old, and writing babies is fantastic because they're just cute and they sit there and you don't have to give them dialogue. And with the third Devlin book, I had Shane, I remember, I was kind of reading through it, my editor came back and said, Shane is sitting on the rug eating a Farley's rusk. surely he's about 6 at this stage. So it's, yeah, the family thing is quite difficult to keep a measure on. I mean, I suppose in a way Devlin is very much a reflection of me in that regard. So when this, like, his daughter's gone to university, my son, my eldest, went to university yesterday. And his father is sick and my dad passed away 2 years ago, which is where this book really came from. And I suppose that is why we write. We kind of write to control the world in a way that it can't be controlled, and to kind of contain it. And I write to work out how I feel about things. So the family dynamic in the books is very much me trying to work out how I feel about changing family dynamics as well.
Brilliant. And that's maybe a good question we'll come back to in a minute for everybody, because I think why we write is quite a significant thing. Claire, I'm going to move to yourself next. We've already hinted that we'll be talking about Ask No Questions.
Yes.
I read it. I got a sneak copy out of Little Acorns when it was closed. And it was great. And I was writing a scene for another book. And then I noticed you had a big scene set in Halloween. I'm like, inevitably do we write about Halloween when we're in Derry? It's such a good pageant to not set something against. But Ask No Questions is a murder of a schoolgirl in Derry on Halloween in 1994, which then rears its head in 2019 when a journalist sets out to investigate. Tell us a wee bit about it and then read us an extract.
Well, the journalist in the novel is a journalist called Ingrid Devlin, and she does appear in some of my other thrillers as well. She's perhaps not the most morally minded of journalists. She would sell her granny to get a story. But people tend to like her as a character, I think, like to hear her maybe. And I thought it'd be really interesting to go in and sort of see who she is as a person and tell a story from her perspective, and I suppose show people her motivations and what's going on with her. So in the book, the schoolgirl who was murdered 25 years previously lived in the next street to Ingrid. They went to the same school, the same sort of group of friends, and the wee girl goes missing on Halloween night, so you can imagine. It's up in Craigan, they're out getting nuts and apples and going round the houses, and one of them goes missing. So Ingrid has always been really caught up in what happened with Kelly, because, I mean, we all know in this part of the world, we were all used to bad things happening, but they were bad things on a sort of political or whatever scale, and it sounds terrible, an ordinary murder of a child, but that sort of thing didn't happen, and it rocked the community to a core. So bringing it up 25 years and to the present day, Ingrid is tasked with writing just sort of, a nice piece for the paper, commemorating Kelly, writing a wee bit about her. It's the anniversary coming up. But the gentleman who was convicted of Kelly's murder has now launched a campaign to clear his name. And Ingrid is quite keen to talk to him and tell his story, but she comes up against quite a few brick walls, it's fair to say. So the story jumps between 1994, keep saying 1996, and 2019. And I'm going to read you this is the prologue, so we're going straight in Ingrid's voice. There are a few other voices in the book as well, but she's the main one. I was 10 years old when I found out that monsters are real and they walk among us. I can pinpoint the exact day that everything changed, when the world I'd found to be fun and innocent and good turned into something dark and frightening. Looking back, I pity my mother having to find the words to tell my brothers and me what had happened. I pitied all the mothers and fathers who were forced to have that same conversation with their children at the dinner table that evening. There'd be no playing out in the street anymore, not in these dark nights. There'd be no nipping in and out of neighbours' houses or knocking on doors looking for a glass of water when we were parched from playing Tig or Red Rover, or riding our bicycles all over the estate in and out of the dark alleyways. We were never to go out on our own, nor walk back from school on our own, even though it would still be light then. We absolutely were not allowed to take a shortcut through the overgrown fields at the back of the school either. And we were never, ever, ever to go into anyone's house on our own, no matter how well we knew them, no matter how many times we'd been there before. Because Kelly Doherty had been found and she was dead, and some bad man or bad woman had hurt her and killed her, and our mothers didn't know how they would ever be able to cope if something like that happened to us. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. For the first time, I hated that I had a room all to myself and my brothers got to share. They got to keep each other company. I curled into as tight a ball as I could manage, hugged Daisy, my tatty stuffed puppy, to me, and squeezed my eyes tight shut. But every noise, every creak, every sound from the street had my imagination running wild. I was scared to move, scared to breathe. I prayed over and over again, channeling my earnest childhood belief and prayer for a greater good, for Jesus himself to come and protect me. O Sacred Heart of Jesus, I place all my trust in thee. I muttered over and over and over until I was stumbling over the words and trying to shake the image of Kelly, dead, like actually dead, from my head. What did dead people look like, I wondered? Had she been scared? Had she been alone? Who was the bad man, or was it a bad woman? At some stage during the dark, long night, I heard voices on the street. Whispers. I couldn't make out the words, but I guessed they could only be talking about one thing, one person. It was all everyone was talking about. It was all everyone was thinking about. I wondered if I crept to the window, if I ducked my head through the curtains, would I be able to hear more? I slipped out from under my duvet, still grasping Daisy tightly, and tiptoed to the window. My breath was loud, heavy, misting against the cold glass, my heart thumping so fast I wondered, was it possible for a 10-year-old to have a heart attack and die? I almost didn't look out of the window, but I steeled myself, took a deep breath and opened my eyes. There was a man, dressed in black, a woolen hat pulled down over his forehead, a scarf or jumper or something high in his neck. But I saw him, and he saw me. He looked straight up at me, raised a gloved hand to gesture to me, to bid me to come to him, and I fell to my knees, then curled into a ball, squeezing my eyes as tightly as I could, because monsters were real. The bogeyman we had always been told was just make-believe stalked our streets.
I think we're already there in that book. Part of me wanted to be stuck at the Red Rover bit and reminisce about the childhood. And one of the things that's lovely about reading books by local authors is they're set in places that we recognise, but they also have all the stuff that, you know, comes with being here. And we'll maybe explore that one as well in a minute, you know, because I think there's something about, you know, the number of writers that are coming out of Derry and writing amazing stuff and getting it published that, you know, it's putting it out there into the world. Dave, I'm going to move to you next, and I thought you were going to pick Oak and Stone, and then you says no, you're going to reminisce and go back to The Greening of Larry Mahon, which I'm delighted to say I had read a number of years ago and loved it, you know, well before I kind of got into writing myself. I'd read that one, and Larry Mahon is alienated from his family. He's from here, but the novel is mainly set in the rainforests of Borneo and then making some parallels with here. So tell us a bit and give us a reading.
Yeah, well, sé bhur maithe agus bhhaile mar ar dús mhuias de sú as an cura who do an imacht seo. How you all doing? And I just want to say, I just want to say thanks to Sue for letting me be part of this terrific panel and this terrific event. Larry Mann is an engineer, escaped from the Troubles by college and swimming. He was getting away, and his travels in engineering companies, as an engineer in logging companies, it takes him to Borneo. Just before he comes home on home leave, a child is killed, a local child, and he carries an image, a ghost of that child with him home. He's alienated from himself, from the town, from his family. And as happens, he's home and he meets an old flame, Clare, and that kind of fires him up again. Jeannie Mac, you know, what happened there? Should I? Yeah. And she invites him to the evening do of her wedding. She's marrying son of the local doctor, himself a doctor. So all of that's kind of in it. And but he has a good fortune to fall in with Brona, who's Clare's sister, and he kind of falls, and she's the bridesmaid. He's talking to Brona at the bar at the do. I hadn't meant to get so serious, and Brona picked up on my change of tone, and she put her glass down on the bar. How do you mean? I don't know. Something about this, I suppose, I said, gesturing with my glass at the wedding reception. I think my parents, they'd have preferred me to have settled down and have a job in the town. With someone like Clare. I must have blushed again because she continued, it doesn't take much to give you a Redner, Larry Mahon. It's kind of cute in a Boy Scout sort of a way. Go on. Don't pretend that you and Clare weren't the twosome of the year when you were at school. Oh, that was years ago. My face was burning off me, but I was saved by the band leader. A stout fellow in a black suit with a fleecy white shirt, showing a mat of chest hair in which nestled a star sign medallion. There are options for audience participation in the next little bit. Come on, everybody, we're doing the hooky cookie. A cheer went up and there was a jovial rush and push between the tables onto the tiny dance space. Come on, Larry Mahon, drink up. This is what getting married is really about. She took my hand and led me onto the floor where a circle had been formed. Already, people were putting their left hand in, putting their left hand out, and they were doing the hokey cokey and shaking it all about. I was surprised at how well I was getting into it, pinned between Brona and the young priest who kept leering across at her. Then we did the hucklebuck, and I felt the sweat on my forehead as I moved and bounced, hands in the air, laughing to myself at the line, "If you don't know how to do it, ask the little sis." "Keep her going," shouted the band leader. "She's only warming up." His announcement that we were ready for the birdie song was greeted with mock groans. Oh, absolutely. But nobody left the dance floor. The circle got bigger. I was the only man with a jacket still on, and I took it off and hung it over a chair behind me as we went into a routine of familiar movements. I couldn't guess how I knew how to do this, tweaking my fingers, flapping my elbows, shaking my hips. It was the most natural thing in the world for me to be sitting with Clare's extended family at the end of the dance set. A sprawl of tables and chairs occupied by brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, all centred on our parents. I found a chair on the extreme edge of the group, and Brona sat next to me. She had brought fresh drinks from the bar. "Now they're really married," she said, catching her breath. "That's the rubber stamp on it, properly. All that stuff with the priest in the cathedral, that was simply prelude to this ritual here. Doing the birdie song sealed it. They're hitched now."
I have to say, we will welcome in the open mic if anybody does want to do the birdie song. That's not a problem. Can I say refrain from the hokey cokey? I'm not sure about social distancing and that. We could get hammered with that one. Thanks very much, Steve. It's great to get the sense of the Derry atmosphere and stuff going. And I know you from mainly sort of the peace and reconciliation world that both of us have worked into an extent, and human rights work and that kind of thing. And I know that the book says something about that as well, and I'm kind of wanting to open it into a conversation that Brian's sort of touched on, but why do we write? But maybe I'll start with yourself and delve into that for us.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, talking to some other people about that. I write because story is how I make sense of the world for myself. Story. I grew up in a house where my mother told stories all the time, and I don't mean legends of Hector and all of that. I mean, just stories about the street, and she worked in laundries primarily, as well as working at home with her 6 kids. But so story is a critical form that I use to explain myself to myself and the world to myself. And with story then, character, Larry Mahon, Eddie Slevin, Donna Bradley, who are, macaronic herself, who are in the novels, and language and voice. So that's kind of different voices, Brona's and Larry Mahon's, and Eddie Slevin, the detective in Oakenstone, his voice appears. So Donna Bradley in the book about the incinerator, her voice appears. So that's why I write. Story makes sense of the world and characters and language. And on reviewing the work, generally the stage work, the film work, the radio work, the novels, they all seem to be about a person in a small group, could be a family or a workplace, said in a big thing. That they're not directly, they're not the prime ministers, but they're involved in there is a big, like logging and environmentalism and all of that, and violence is in Larry Mahon. So that seems to be why write story.
Yeah. I know that when I when I started to write, I hadn't a clue really why I wrote, but I think having processed it over time, I write for empathy. I'm trying to get people to think, same kind of thing. You're trying to say, here's a topic that I want to write about. And the way you do that is to find the character who has a lot to lose in that scenario and a story to tell. And maybe they're learning about that as they travel through it, And I think I found working in the field of peace and reconciliation and community work that I kind of do in the day job, that we try so many different types of approaches to try and help people learn about the other, whatever that other happens to be, and to engage with that diversity. And for me, writing was a different way to reach a new audience, you know. But I'm struck that, given that we've two kind of crime writers as well, you know, we do touch on a lot of the Northern Irish type issues. You know, I don't know, Claire, do you want to come in on that kind of thing? Why do you write? Or
You know, if somebody asked me that question, it's like, why do I write? Because I can't not write. And I wish I could come up with some sort of, you know, really clever motivation. That it's just always been in me. I think before I could actually form the words, I do remember folding pieces of paper in half and drawing pictures, and I wrote a book, you know, so it has always been there, and it's always been about the written word, which is why I went into print journalism. I stayed away from broadcast, because for me it's always been about being able to tell people's stories, be they, you know, factual through journalism, and in these books, I suppose, I just like looking into other people's lives and giving other people a taste of what other people's experience might be. Because I write in different genres, there are different motivations, I suppose, for each genre. When I'm writing a romantic comedy, I'm writing it to entertain people and to sort of, I suppose, give people a bit of a lift and a bit of a laugh. When I'm writing the crime stuff, I do tend to write around maybe some issues, deeper issues from our society, from our community, things that are happening now that maybe are brushed under the carpet, things that I may have come into contact with or heard about when I was working as a journalist for so many years, and these stories have stayed with me. So issues such as domestic violence and coercive control, the death of children, the book that's coming out in January actually involves the incel movement, which was written before Plymouth and everything, but you know, it's now really much come into news, and it looks at issues about what's going on in society at the minute, in social media, and how men feel. And so I suppose I'm exploring it for me, but I'm also trying to say to people, I heard this story once from a real person, and they told me their experience, and I'm not obviously going to tell you their real experience again and pretend it's a fictional novel, but I think you need to know that this is happening in the world, and you need to know how people are dealing with it. And you said the word empathy, to realise that it's that thing, everybody's fighting a battle you know nothing about. And working as a journalist, people goes, oh, who's the most famous person you ever interviewed or ever met? And I say to them, the most interesting stories you will ever hear are not from the famous people or the big names. Ordinary people do extraordinary things in this town every day. I've constantly
I think that's something that is in common amongst what I have read of our collective work. It's the ordinary everyday folk that we tend to put there in the protagonist role, you know.
Definitely.
Brian, I heard you say at a different event, it was down in Armagh, the John Hewitt, and you said something that really struck me, probably again with the community relations hat on. It was, writers are the truth commission that Northern Ireland never got. Or maybe you set that as a question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do. I think that is the case. I mean, I think if history is written by the victor, who writes history when there's no victor? Or when everybody claims to have won? And I think that's kind of what's happening at the minute. We've got everybody trying to tell their version of the story, which is why we've got this thing that's happening now where we're creating hierarchies of victims and having discussions over who's a more worthy victim than who, which is absolute rubbish. I mean, if somebody's a victim, if somebody is grieving, if somebody has lost someone, then that matters, and they feel that, and it doesn't really, trying to put a hierarchy on it or trying to label it is just absurd. I mean, I agree totally with what Claire and Dave said. To me, writing is a compulsion. It is something that I have no control over. It's something when I don't do, I get quite agitated. If I tried to stop writing, I couldn't. I know we tend to talk, kind of erroneously, we tend to talk about writers as people who are published, which isn't the case. Writers are people who feel that need to tell a story. Whether they're published or not is irrelevant. Being published simply means you're getting paid for it, which is a very nice way to be and a very fortunate and privileged position to be in. But a writer is somebody who feels that need to tell a story. And the town is absolutely coming down with them. I think for us, and there is a bigger argument over publishing from Northern Ireland. I mean, Stuart Neville, who's a crime writer from Armagh, wrote a piece recently where he said, I'm not going to hide being Irish anymore, or being Northern Irish. And this related to the fact his very first book was called The Ghosts of Belfast in America, but his English publisher said, no, that won't sell here. You're calling it The 12 here. Nobody will want to buy a book with Belfast in the title. And to be honest, much as I would love to say that's not the case anymore, that is completely the case still. There is a reluctance to read literature from Northern Ireland, partly because people, I think they know what they're going to get, or else people kind of beyond here perhaps kind of feel, well, I know what this is going to be and I don't really care.
It's almost like an expectation
Yeah.
that this is what you will write and you will
And I saw even about 2 years ago, the Sunday Times did a list of the 100 most influential crime novels of the past 50 years, and they picked Harry's Game as the definitive crime novel of Northern Ireland. Now, Harry's Game was written about 5 or 6 years into the violence. So it doesn't touch at all on anything that happened afterwards, doesn't touch on the peace process. And you look at the wealth of crime fiction that has come out of Northern Ireland, and you're thinking the Sunday Times are picking a novel from 1976 written by an English journalist as a definitive story of Northern Ireland. I mean, that kind of tells you everything you need to know about that attitude to Northern Ireland, which I think leads us to a more interesting point. Then why do we all still write about Northern Ireland? Why do we feel that need?
Yeah.
Well, I know I write about it. I read Stuart's article, and I think I tweeted that I was like cheering reading it, because it's not going to change. We're not going to get a wider audience unless we stand up and go, this is how we talk, this is our community, these are our authentic voices. And I mean, obviously a completely different medium, but Derry Girls has proven that we can transcend, and that story is story, and that regardless of, I suppose, what runs through it and background, there is a common experience that we all have. We're all human. We all have the same sort of hopes and fears and whatever else. But we have to be proud to stand up and to use our voice, because nobody would ever say to an author from London or Bristol or Glasgow, hey, tone it down. You know, they're encouraged to do it. But what I will say is that I'm now with imprint of HarperCollins. They're London based, and they really encourage me to put more dairy in, and the flavour and the accent, and they have done. The place where I met resistance to that, and where my manuscripts would come back and they would change mammy to mam and things like that, was my Dublin publisher. And they really toned down the northern stuff. And so that was very, very strange to me, because I was going like, we're all
I
Irish.
experienced a bit of that actually, because I had some people tell me, you know, when I was trying to break into publishing, that story's too local. But it was the people in Ireland were telling me the story was too local. And actually it was a London agent and publisher that went for it, because they saw the universality and they didn't know anything about Northern Ireland, and yet when they read it, they related to the story and they wanted to know more. You know, so it's interesting. And yet at the same time, I know I've had edited out of books things like 15s. Nobody knows what 15s are. And tout, I had to argue about that one, because all Derry folk knew what a tout was, you know. But even dandering up the walls, I got told dandering, it means something completely different. And so you have that kind of back and forth to retain the authenticity of something, you know. If you don't mind, I'm in the position of having to chair a panel, and I'm trying to plug my own book here as well at the same time. So I'm going to read you a wee extract out of Guard Your Heart, which kind of links into that sense of place. So I've picked a wee bit which is very Derry. Guard Your Heart, to give you a wee bit of background. You know, we were talking about books that are compared to from Northern Ireland or about Northern Ireland. A lot of people have said to me that Guard Your Heart is a little bit like Joan Lingard's Across the Barricade series. And, you know, did I deliberately set it with that in mind? To which I repeatedly have to tell people, you know, that's 50 years old. You know, it's not just one generation out of date, it's actually 2 generations out of date. It was written before I was born, and I'm not wild young, really. You know, so it's a wonderful comparison, and I'm honoured with it. But I think today's teenagers, and I have 2 18-year-olds as protagonists in this, are living in a very different north of Ireland, you know. So there's 2 voices in my book, Aidan and Iona, who are both 18 and both born on the day of the Good Friday peace deal, but from very, very different backgrounds. One from the Waterside, one from Craigan. So this is in Aidan's voice, and these 2 are getting together for the first time after a pretty violent incident that Aidan was the victim of and Iona had witnessed. So they're kind of sussing each other out a wee bit. After leaving the cafe, we dawdled over the brick-cobbled crest of Butcher's Gate and past the railings fronting First Derry Presbyterian Church. I smirked at the memory, me, 10, sprinting after Shan like a blue-arsed fly down the bank and after paint bombing its great columns one July night. God, but Ma had lit into us after dragging out the explanation for the yellow gloss on our runners. Da's cigarette had wobbled as he tried not to laugh. I could see Iona wondering why I was smiling, but I'd kept my thoughts private. For all I knew, it could be her church. The rain had emptied the walls of all but a handful of Yanks with oversized raincoats and bum bags as we dandered past St Augustine's. Suited me fine not to bump into anyone I knew. God knows what rumours I'd have generated walking up the town with a new sidekick, and a Protestant at that. During the Troubles, the walls had hosted a green British Army observation tower like a misplaced Lego build. I was around 6 when I remember Da pulling in our old Skoda at Friiday Corner and dragging my attention off the Nintendo DS up to where they were ripping off the iron cladding. Changing times, demilitarisation. Days when the walls were gated and locked for every old firm match and only the maddest entrepreneurs were wittering about tourist dollars. In the 70s, the IRA blew a 90-foot pillar topped with Governor Walker sky high. It had towered over the bog side, imposing its Britishness on the Catholic houses huddled in the terraced streets below. Da had revelled in telling glory stories of chunks of its rubbles decorating bogside mantelpieces. Rose-tinted bedtime stories delivered with slurred words and the smell of beer. Iona and I had walked past the pillar stump and the trees on Grand Parade to the orange brick of the Verbal Arts Centre. To imagine, to create, to learn, read the stone plaque over its door. Fine if you're 5 and playing with plasticine. In the good old days, we played with grey plasticine that smelled of Christmas and went boom, my dad used to brag. Part of me still wished I was 5. It was easier to know who you were in them days. I glanced at Iona. Best to keep radio silence on the IRA family heritage. I couldn't resist clambering on the cannons at Double Bastion, overlooking the bogside murals. Iona had looked up as I'd grinned like a maniac, delicately balanced with my arms held wide on the barrel of Roaring Meg. Have you ever broken a bone? She asked. You my guardian now? I'd laughed back, raising my bandaged fingers. I'd broken my left arm when I was 5, running too fast down Craigan Hill after a football. When I was 7, I badly sprained an ankle playing Superman off a 5-foot wall in our playground. At 10, I turned my big toe ligorous after busting it with a brick on a building site at dusk. Ma was a season ticket holder at A&E. So what are you for now school's out? I'd asked Iona as I straddled the barrel, watching her gaze over the ramparts down the grass to Friiday Corner. Her heart was set in studying English at Queen's University in Belfast. I must have skipped school the day they taught decision making. My crystal ball was drowned in slurry somewhere. I had an offer from Queen's too, but I'd fit university like a fart in a wetsuit. Middle class bollocks. Our clan were smart like, but no one had mortarboard photos over the fireplace. Saoirse could make anyone do anything. Sean quit school early over his dyslexia, but he could wire everything. Cars, radios, your head with bloody community politics. No one really had any expectations of me, except myself after a few pints. Then I'd be for taking on the world. Aunt Teresa needed prayer when I scraped enough GCSEs to get back into year 13. My teachers needed vodka. So... I picked that given that we're sitting here in the bogside, but also to kind of cue in a thought about, we've talked about why we write. Why do we write Derry? Is there a specific sort of sense of place about your writing, you know, or... Who wants to go first?
Oh, well, I feel as if I'm jumping on, so I don't. And I haven't done an event since this pandemic started, so I'm like, I'm out of the house. I'm going to talk to people. I can honestly say it never occurred to me not to write Derry, not to set a book here, right here. I suppose when you go into that, like, write what you know. So I know Derry and I know Derry people, but I also think we have so much going for us in terms of, you know, we've great characters, great community, we've history geographically, we've this setting that loans itself to so many different stories. So there's so much positive to set a book here and to tell our stories. But I just think, why not? And that's suppose that's been my question along. Why not? I am a ridiculously proud Derry woman, and I just want everybody to know. But
I mean, I love the sense of voice that people have here. I mean, what I missed during COVID was the eavesdropping, you know, when you were sitting in a cafe or that you hear the phrase and you're like, I'm writing that down. That's going in something. You know, the characters
hairdressers is the
the
best
hairdressers
place
is
for one
brilliant, I
to
have
go.
to
It's
say. It's
cracker.
not so good with the social distancing and everything now. You can't quite hear as well, you know. But there was the first time I went to the hairdressers, I'll have to say this, and you've cued it in. Like, the first time I went to the hairdressers, when they opened after COVID, I was sitting there with stuff on my hair, and this little old lady walked in, and this was one of those notebook women. She says, what was it? You could hide a cereal colour in my eyebrows. I'm a way to get them done after this. You know, there's one for the crime writers.
Brilliant.
Any other comments on why we write here, or whether the stories from here have a market wider? You know, you're heard all over the world with your stuff, you know.
Go ahead,
No,
Brian.
you go first.
Yeah. Well, I'd just like to, one point of clarification. Hairdressers is not a good source of information for me, just to kind of get that out there, though I endorse all of Clare's remarks. Where else would I write? This is where I live. You know, I'm here since 1981. If I lived in Los Angeles, I'd be writing books about Los Angeles. If I lived in London, I'd be here, you know, and I endorse Clare's remarks about stories, character, language, which are the three things that interest me, as I said. So, however, just a slight twist on Sue's question and Clare's remark, I'm not writing about here. You know, I'm not writing about Derry as in an exceptional place. I'm writing about people who happen to be in this place, perhaps, but I'm writing about every woman, every man. You know, so the sense I have is that the local is universal. Some interesting remarks, I think Brian said it about, you know, writers assuming that if a book is from London, it's universal. Ask a couple of Nigerian novelists, Chinwe Achebe, people like that, you know, Ngozi Iweala from Kenya, and Ben Okri, they write really critically about that idea is, if you write a Nigerian novel, oh, it's a Nigerian novel, it's local. You write a London novel, it's universal. You know, so I think that's a critical point. But yeah, I am writing universal books. Larry Mahan's a universal story, though they are all maybe set or connected here because I live here. You know, and known to me, and though I'm a blow-in, go back to Frank's eloquent description, I'm a blow-in since '81, but I'm very proud to live here and rear my family here and so on, make a life here. City's been very good to me. So I'm writing universal books that happen to be set here. If I lived in Sheffield or Limerick, I would be doing the same thing. Macaronic, the science fiction novel, is set in a data centre, Irish language novel, set in a data centre in the future. That's set in Derry. So, a dystopian future in a data centre. But it's in Derry, you know, so
Yeah.
I live here. So I think that's part of it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's as everyone else has said, I suppose I should say, whenever I started writing the very first Devlin, which was 2002, I started writing it set in Derry, with Devlin as a police officer here. And there were two things that made me stop. One of them was that I had difficulty, I suppose, in working out how best to present him as a character. And the PSNI was in such flux at that stage, and there were so many issues over it, that I kind of thought the book would be immediately anachronistic, because things were changing so often. But the thing which actually caused me most concern was that I was setting things in Derry, and I kind of wanted to do that thing that writers get to do, where they just can put buildings in places where they need them. And I kind of said, well, I can't say that because everyone knows that's a sweet shop. And I got so caught up in geographical accuracy, I moved them to Lufford. I lifted Borderlands from Muff and shifted up to Lufford as well. Because I kind of thought nobody's going to mind, obviously, with all due respect to people from Lufford. And then I ended up in Lufford myself for quite a while. But it took me quite a while before I felt I was able to write about here. I mean, I did 4 Devlins before I wrote a book set in Derry. And even then, I set it in Prehen Woods, because I grew up in Prehen Woods. I grew up beside Prehen. I wasn't a feral child. I grew up next to Prehen Woods. But it was that real kind of magical place. And woodlands are always fairy tales. Every woodland is a fairy tale setting, and I wanted to write a kind of crime fairy tale. And Prehen Woods was a perfect place for it. And I kind of found by that stage I felt confident enough as a writer to write about Derry, and I felt that the policing situation had developed enough that I felt comfortable with having a central character who was a PSNI officer. So having said that, there's a Patrick Kavanagh line from Epic, which I absolutely love, when he begins to doubt himself and Homer's ghost appears and tells him, I made the Iliad from such a local roy. Gods make their own importance. And there is that. Every roy is local to somebody. Just because it's local to us doesn't mean that it doesn't have universal significance. Yeah. Having said that, the next book that I've written is the first not set here. Right. And that's not a deliberate thing. It's not actually set anywhere. It's it's very much focused on a single character. And the location wasn't really that significant to it. Mm-hmm. And it's the first book that I've written where I wasn't very aware of location, and I don't know why. Maybe I just needed a break. It's kind of 12 books in at this stage. So
I think I normally need to know in my head where I am. The next book that I have coming out, it's partly set in Derry and partly set in Armagh, and one of the characters comes from rural Armagh, and I had that debate. I deliberately don't name the village that they're from, because I think if I did, I would have that impact of people saying, oh, this is not right and that's too controversial, and so there is a sense where even in fiction, there's lines you don't stray. We're getting close to the end of our time here, actually, so I'm just going to ask have any of the audience got questions of stuff we haven't covered that you're keen to know? It could be about the writing process or about the books or anything you want to know about. If she's wild quiet, I'm going to ask them another question, but, feel free to shout. Go ahead. What do you like to read?
Everything, and anything. And I think I'm going to mention audiobooks. Have opened my mind to loads of different genres that I wouldn't have picked up before. So I'll read. I do enjoy a good rom-com. I do enjoy women's fiction. That's where I started reading. So I do love the storytelling of Marion Keyes and Barry McFarlane and people like that, with just like real funny voices. I actually didn't really read crime at all before I started writing crime. I think I'd read Brian's books and that was kind of it. But now I'm a wee bit addicted to reading those as well. But I think I have learned that you never quite know if something, just if the wee blurb gets you, just give it a wee go anyhow. And books have the power to surprise you. There's books I thought, I'm going to hate that, and they've ended up, top of the list, and vice versa.
I know I'm pretty much a random reader. I mean, as a single parent for many years, I didn't have time to read except at Christmas or holidays. That was the reality of it. So I don't consider myself a very widely read person, when it comes to many things. But at the minute, I love Kevin Barry, as long as you don't mind a bit of flowery prose in there. I think he's brilliant how he writes stuff. Or Donal Ryan's writing as well. I really enjoy this. I tend to like novels over short stories, but I read short stories to look at how people write it, and some of them are unbelievably good at that, Any other comment on that one?
Brian?
Yeah, just anything that's beautifully written. To be totally honest, I'll read anything. But it is one of those things. It's like sports players want to play against the best teams because you learn so much more. And there's nothing better than reading something and going, oh, Jesus, that's amazing. I wish I'd done that. But had I done that, it wouldn't have been anywhere near as good.
Yeah.
And it's that moment, and particularly that moment of human recognition. It's that moment when you read something and go, yes, I totally get that. So anything, there's that Heaney, Human Chain, his poem about the final letting go. And I remember reading the last line of that for the first time and just feeling like I'd been punched. That's what I like reading.
That's the best feeling in a book. When you finish a book, when you read that last line and you have to take a moment.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. That's when you know somebody has done the job right. Where you can't even talk, you can't speak, you just have to go.
That's nice.
And that's what I aim for when I'm writing. When I write the last line of my book, if it doesn't make me go, as well as a wee bit of thank God, then I know the ending's not right and I have to go back on it at some stage. But that's what you want when you're reading.
Yeah. Dave?
Same to the three of us here. Read everything. I read very widely and a lot. I enjoy it. My mother told stories. My father read books in a factory working household, and so I grew up with that. What do I like? Just a small step aside. The Human Chain, the Heaney book. I was dead in hospital 11 years ago. Now I'm resurrected, kind of a Lazarus moment. But 11 years ago, I was dead in hospital, and my son read The Human Chain to me while I was in ICU, and I always thank him for that. It's a powerful occurrence in my life. So books, anything. Today I got Girl, Woman, Other from the library. Bernardine Evarista's novel.
I have that sitting
I
on
look
my
out
coffee
for
table.
I look out for Booker Prize books, not all of them, but a bit of Brian's thing about the best, as it were, or the perceived best. But I tend to read them 3 or 4 years after the hype, you know.
Yeah.
Conversations Among Friends, the Sally Rooney first book. I'll read that at Christmas again, you know, well after it's come out, you know, although there's a film thing coming out about it. So, just finished Les Miserables. That's a dinger. And The Miserables.
Yeah.
One thing I would say about it is you can skip. People say, how do you read Ulysses? Skip. You know, skip's cool. Skip. Go back to it if you want. But I really liked Claire's remark about the punch effect, the silencing effect. Your head's been full of these voices, the writer's voice, the character's voices, and they've had the profound associative effect of silencing in a positive way, as in quieting the reader. I have similar experiences of certain moments of being at theatre where I've come out and the usual hubbub after a theatre, we'll go for a drink and chat. I get the bus home, huffy head, and the people I live with go, leave him alone, he'll take about a fucking hour to come out of this. And so that moment is important to me, yeah.
Any other questions? I know that there's some writers in this room as well as readers and culture lovers. Anybody else want to ask a question? Will you have the
I was listening to what you were saying about agents and publishers from Ireland not being very keen on novels set in the north. So do you see that you would be better approaching agents and publishers in England and Scotland rather than people down south?
It's a much smaller market here, I think. And I mean, that's only my experience of one particular publisher. My agent is from the south of Ireland. I'm published with a UK publisher now. I think when you're sending out to agents, the best thing that you can look at is people that you admire as writers, people that you like, people you think you're writing similar to. Read their books and their acknowledgement. They'll tell you who their agent are. That's how I chose who I wanted to send mine out to. So I know that they already like the sort of thing that I'm putting out into the world, just like pushing it an open door. I mean, my publishers did sort of tone down the northern stuff, but story is story. Nobody is going to turn down a story from here if the sort of the meat of it's good.
If they can sell it. You know?
Yeah, exactly. It for them it comes down to it's a business decision.
I would say, you know, as someone who's sort of recently through that process, it's very, very competitive to get an agent or a publisher. So, you know, if you get a bite or an interest from anyone, you know, you strongly consider what you're hearing, or even if you get what we call a positive rejection, where somebody says no but gives you some reasons why, it's always worth listening to what they have to say within that, you know, because it is very difficult to get out there. But I do know that that's what I was told by a couple of people. No, the book's a wee bit local, but it took somebody who was an outsider to see the universality of something that they could put in that, you know. And then there's a bit of back and forth and editing to make sure it is universally accessible, even though it's still authentically here, you know. Good question.
I mean, I don't know if it's a case where publishers would necessarily turn down a book because it's set in Northern Ireland. If it's a good story, they'll take it. In the advertising of it and the blurbing of it, they may well kind of try to hide a bit of its Northern Irish quality. In some cases not. I mean, what any writer is looking for with a book is that it makes a connection with another person. And that's what you're looking for in an agent. You're looking for an agent who comes back to you and says, yeah, that was great. I want to represent that book. I want to be part of its journey. And I mean, if you get a couple of offers from agents, fantastic. The one warning that I would give is sometimes it's tempting to kind of go for the big agent, but you need to bear in mind that the big agent has big authors who are earning their yachts, whereas you initially will be earning them their lunch money, and they will put commensurate effort into the books that are earning them yachts over the ones that are paying for their whatever, their Cafe Nero sandwich. Sometimes a younger agent who's just starting out, my TV agent, I was the first person to sign with her when she started, and she's superb, fantastic. I sold rights so many times, just because she needs to. There is a kind of financial imperative there as well. But if you get anybody, as Sue says, if you get anybody who's supportive of the story and believes in the story, what you need is a champion.
It's such a key relationship. It really is. Because you are trusting your agent with your career and to guide you in the right direction, and they're going to be the person that's deciding who to submit to, and they'll advise you, and obviously they're going to negotiate for you should it come to that stage. But it's 100% a trust relationship, and you have to have that connection, and you have to believe that they believe in you 100%, because if they don't.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's about, I mean, you're looking for passion from a publisher, from an agent, but also from the readers as well, you know. And I think maybe we'll have to leave it there. I'm hanging around. I don't know if the others are or not, but what we're going to do now is take a wee 5-minute break. There's still tea and coffee at the back, or if you need to nip outside for a smoke, whatever, you can feel free and then come back in. But we are going to move into the spoken word part of the evening. I would like to thank the panellists for coming along here and talking about the books tonight. Maybe give them a round of applause. And
Thank you.
also, a shameless plug to say all of these books are probably available in the local bookstores. Please support local. There's a great wee bookshop called Little Acorns on Foyle Street there. And more shameless plug, and there's actually some at the back on special offer. If you're interested in having, you can. So that's it. I'm going to hand over to Mel, but we'll take a 5-minute break and then do spoken word. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
It went so quick. You can tell I haven't been out of the house. It's like,
No, I felt the same. There when you said it. I'm out.
exactly. Exactly. Yes.
What can you do with WordPress.com? You can create an amazing website with hundreds of beautiful themes to choose from. Open your online store. Want to start a blog? Just start writing. How about adding a video to your portfolio? Simply drag, drop, and publish. And you can do it all from anywhere. But that's just the start. With WordPress.com, you can start building your website for free and then grow it with a plan that's just right for you. Reach a new audience with marketing tools built right into your website. Customize your website with thousands of plugins. Flexible, powerful, and built for whatever you want to create. There's a reason WordPress is the most popular site building platform on the internet. Do anything. Start for free today.
The funky music off. Awesome. Thank you guys for hanging around, and for anybody that's watching, hello and welcome to Off the Page. When I decided on the name Off the Page, it was not that we're not going to be reading our work or having paper there to prompt us. It was more the difference between page poets and spoken word poets. That's the difference. And because so the whole idea of tonight of having these 3 literary events was that we're really putting it out there to try and get a literary festival here in Derry, because we should have one, because there's enough of us writers knocking about, and why the hell should we have to travel to other locations just to have our work heard and just to have people to join in the fun. Content warning, adult content warning. There will be probably sweary words. We're spoken word poets. That's what we do. We tell it like it is. And, so if you've got sensitive ears, sorry, not sorry. So I'm gonna, so the other thing, tonight was, tonight I have been launching the, For the Love of Mary, My Pocket Mary, app, mobile app. It's currently in the, it will be released on Google Play over the weekend. Keep an eye out, and you can send your petition to Mary. Anonymously send your petition to Mary. What's on your mind? Let Mary know. She'll give a wee ear, and we'll get what the intention is for us to gather the petitions that you send to build the visuals for the show. That's the whole point of it. Anyway, to kick us off, I'm going to introduce you to the most, whenever somebody says to you, who do you want on your list for the night? Abby Oliveira, you are always up there, top of my list of people that I want to have at a night. So it's been so long since we've been in the same room. I just want to hug and say hey. But yeah, so I will hand it over to you. I'm going to swap the mic over just because we're being COVID safe. So I'm going to swap the mic over for Abby. So Abby, it's all yours. Take it away. Yeah, round of applause.
Thank you. Well, we probably won't even really need the mic, so that's grand. I'm actually kind of glad that we're just a few heads in here tonight, because, it's crazy that, I have an uncanny ability to remember reams and reams of text. It's uncanny. But I'm realising now that we're coming out of lockdown, and I don't know whether it's COVID or giving birth or a bit of both, but I'm finding it really difficult to, and I'm feeling all like, oh, yeah, so I'm glad there's just a few wee intimate heads the night. So I know that we're streaming. Are we streaming? That's grand. So how are you doing? So, if I do sort of get all tongue-tied and stuff, it's a lot of friendly faces, so I'll be grand. All right, okay. So we'll start off with this one, and yeah, I'm going to do a couple of short ones, which is anathema to me. I've just got the first draft of my poetry manuscript put together finally after all this time. And the guy that's been helping me, Dave Lorden, one of the things he said to me was, yeah, you could really do with some short poems. I love an owl epic, So I'm going to do some short ones, and then I'll maybe do a longer one at the end. So I'm going to start with this one, and it's called Water. We'll start with a bit of a meditative vibe, and I invite you all to take a wee breath and maybe shut your eyes. And I want you to try and join me in this place where I'm at. This is actually the first poem of a whole series of poems about a certain subject that you'll probably become clear once I get to the end of this short piece. Okay. Breath and eyes closed. Just to sit by running water, drowning the goblins in your hair. To get there just in the nick of time as your heart burst its banks and flooded the crossroads. Just to hold your shivering self steady. Every cell of your body scream and thrash metal-like with life. You love being alive, mind. When you've carried yourself home many's a night. Just a priceless gold-plated lighter inherited from your grandfather that your grandmother paid a £5 and 5 coupons for. Every stress in your skull screwed up tightly in your palm and slipped into its flame like a note in class. Just to feel that heat, that hangover, the sanctuary of jacaranda trees in Lisbon, to dance like a bairn who'd never seen purple snow, just to sit by the water, remembering all this is just a breath. And just for this moment, the air is vintage Scotch. When some great tit emerges from the sticks and twigs and says, "Oh my God, can I touch your hair?" Cheers. So that just goes on to a whole series of poems. Well, poems about hair. The second one that we did, I'll never be able to do it public because we recorded it in the studio with what do you call it? It's a certain type of mic and it gives you a 3D sound. But we just kind of went a bit mad in the studio and it was dead experimental, so I'll never be able to actually do it live. So hopefully you'll get to hear it sometime. Okay, second one. This is called New Orleans Clarinet. Really, my manuscript is about sort of, you know the way music, certain songs can just transport you to a certain place in your life or a certain conversation, and sometimes it's the most random memories that it throws up for you, so this is one about that. Don't touch that fucking thing. It's cursed. It's haunted. I'll no hear it on in here. Keeps yapping about doomsday, UDA, IRA, cyclic. Forgot already, Jesus Christ. UDA, IRA, cyclic. Millennium bugs gonna eat us. The very dogs on the streets are mental. Did you ken we were made by aliens? No jokes. A slave race made to mine gold. Research it on the internet. You ken what the internet's for. Saddles, crims and pedos. I'll nae hae it on in here. Dinna touch that button or you're in tay. Here, Rolly, glass of wine. Aye, it's grand stuff that. 3 for a tenner. I have a bottle in me. I'm just waiting on a 10 deal. I smoked a haleen to myself yesterday. No, you can't watch the news. Jog on, I've told you about that fucking poison. Sit down to your ears. Gone quit playing snake. They things are going to murder conversation. Do you ken they reckon that by 2020 folk will no be fit to think? Illuminati scheme. I plan to be deed lang afore it, and I'll go listening to this bliss. He presses play. New Orleans clarinet swoons across the room. Out to the slick black tarmac, neon costume jeweled night, singing of 29th and Dearborn, 29th and Dearborn. Sexiest sound on the planet. I think I'm in love. Thanks. This is called Map of the World in Primary Colours. It's a wee homage to my teacher who taught us a specific way to remember which countries were which just by sight and the shape of the countries and so on and so forth. And how that it's really stuck with me, you know, those wee lessons that she taught us. Our teacher unravelled the world one day. She stuck a thumbtack in Scotland's thick ear and declared us a pinprick on a pinprick whizzing through space. She showed us a nose in the Hebrides, the chin in Kintyre, Arran and Islay, the UK, cross-armed, hunchbacked, a Victorian judge. Iceland, an unshorn ram. Italy, a couture boot. Mexico, the witch's lockjaw. South America, panther's tooth. Greenland, skull of an ancient seahorse. The USA in its belly. heart chambers, the beat-up waves of Hudson Bay, Fox Basin. Mother Africa's afro wrapped from South Sudan to the Atlas Mountains. And I can still see the koala bear in Ireland, you know. It's just these days, her necklace is a throat slit by a dirty, blunt blade. Thank you. I'm not sure. I might do one with a bit of a backing track or one without. I know. I'm looking to you like I want you to tell me what to do. It's ridiculous. Yeah, all right. Could you put that Kingpin track on? So this one has got a bit of a hip hoppy vibe to it, because I do some hip hoppy vibe stuff, you know. So yeah, this is just one called Kingpin, and it's about, you know, there's a whole social fucking disaster where, you know, these kingpin drug dealers be bringing young boys into their mix to do all the running for them, you know. And these young lads they think this is the best thing in the world, and this is how they're going to get where they need to go in life, and really, they're not. So it's called Kingpin. Thank you very much, gently. All right, hit play. Don't leave me standing here like this. Yeah, grand, okay. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Kingpin. And I just want to say, this was a lovely way to restart performing again, so thank you all very much. 3 o'clock in the morning, no rest for the addicted, tormented by these mental images of a man I've never even met, the Kingpin. He sits at the head of the boardroom, a slick-lipped prick with a manicure, never sure if he's grinning or grimacing, a philanthropist, a well-adjusted citizen, and everyone respects him. Ask him, when were your hands last tainted by the sickness of addicts as you were raking their pockets for bad debt? When were you last sent in to collect? He'll tell you for himself that's the dog's work. He only did it while he seed-funded his empire. His kids really think those damn spots on his hands are stigmata. But our kid sees pinpricks on a treasure map. Speculative fiction, of course. He's never met him before and never will. Even when he's rocking in the corner of a prison cell for him. Even if he owns him and he's paying for the privilege of a bit part in some Hollywood corrupted panto, a Scottish city ghetto. Watch them as they go. Watch them as they go. Watch them as they go. The wee north-facing gangsters, their cocaine egos. Watch them as they go, watch them as they go. One by one, while the Kingpin languishes in Monaco. Our kid says his girlfriend left him. Now he sleeps with a machete by the bed. Said she didn't want to spend her life like this, visiting prisons on the odd weekend off from the night shift. Nah, her horizon shifted. He could fly with her or finish it, but he still owed a debt to the Kingpin seat. So here's what he did. Seeing no other options, burned another solid bridge. I heard our kid said he sees no point in living anymore. From a friend of a friend of a friend who says, say nothing, listen to the drug talk corrupting his tongue. Reckons he spent everything that made life worth living. Like friendships, relationships, apprenticeships sinking, illusions of a life straight out of the best wet dream of the Kingpin. He will not be on the guest list for cocktails when they happen, but keeps eating what they're feeding him regardless of ingredients. He never even checks. He's got a reputation to upkeep regardless. And isn't that just mistaken beauty and ugliness for money or the lack of it? Revenue for value, repulsion for respect. Legally, illegally, it barely counts for shit, he says. Watch them as they go, watch them as they go. We north-facing gangsters, their cocaine egos. Watch them as they go, watch them as they go. One by one, while the Kingpin languishes in Monaco. Watch them as they go, watch them as they go. The wee north-facing gangsters, their cocaine egos. Watch them as they go. In some Hollywood corrupted panto, a Scottish city ghetto. Watch them as they go. Thanks very much, everybody. Cheers. Thank you. These are the wee skills you lose. Somebody's going to have to come and help me here. Thanks. Cheers. Okay. Yeah. Oh. And end. I'm surprised more people haven't been killed because of mic drops.
Okay, so thank you so much, Abby. That was fucking awesome. There's the swear words. That was awesome. And yeah, welcome back into the. There's a mic in a room. There's people. I know it's not boxes on the internet. It's class. Yeah. So. Swiftly moving onwards and ever so slightly to my left, we are going to have the ever so lovely and wonderful Clare Allan North come up next. And again, I'm going to do that mic switch thing, so bear with me a wee second. Thank you very much. Give it up for Clare Allan North.
Thank you. So I suffer from shaky leg syndrome, as Mel knows. So at one point, if everything looks like it's shaking, there's nothing wrong with the screen. It's just me as a person. So this first poem is called "Mary, Give Me Strength." Sorry. My Aunt Mary used to reminisce about a woman named Linda who come calling on a Sunday with the King James Bible pointed out in front of her like an old Tommy gun. Not the Linda carries such things. Traipsing up the falls in her Sunday best with her hair all done like Sheba and her nice church shoes pounding the pavement with righteous force and God's good doing. Linda had the permissions, her family being who they were, to call on the homes of the non-committed, try getting switched over, saved, as she would call it, to the one true faith of the Free Presbyterian Church. Most just slammed the door in the face and told her to fuck off. But my Aunt Mary, she used to let Linda in for tea and prayer. Welcome rest for the weary traveller, she said. Aunt Mary was committed, though, to the one true faith of the Roman Catholic Church and had a hatred for the other, which she let Linda know. But still, my Aunt and Linda sat on Sundays, drinking in tea and piety in their best clothes and voices like God himself was watching, not just me sitting in the corner with my crayons and my maths books. Only once did she say to me, her breath reeking of hospital oxygen, 13 years, and that heathen Linda never once took off her coat nor her nice church shoes in my house. That's outsiders for you, kitten. You never really want to come in. Now, I don't know if she was right, but my aunt was dead and buried, and we had the funeral mass, and Linda never came and was gone forever, and that was that. And the memory moves less in my mind over time, like some fat grey cat that's getting on in years. Still, out of habit, when I go to a new house, I always take off my coat or my shoes, and I never wear my Sunday best nor talk in polite tones. And some think me rough or uncultured, like my ma didn't raise me with a wooden spoon to the back legs from my elbows on the table. But looking back, Belfast is a cold city. And my Aunt Mary wasn't one for heating when an old jumper or my granny's woolen blanket would do. Linda, her family being who they were, probably wasn't used to the cold air of a Belfast bungalow midwinter, even when warmed by women's laughter and builder's brew. And I quite liked her in her church shoes, to be honest. I used to make her bookmarks of Good Holy Mary and St. Bridget, not knowing any better. And Linda used to slip me a sweet out of her sermon coat as she left, body hunched up against the rising thick air of Belfast. Church shoes pounding the pavement in a brazen proddy march for God, for Ulster, for Reverend Paisley, clutching my Hail Marys through the dark. Thank you. Shaky start, but I got there. So the next one I'm going to do is called the Belfast Villanelle, but since I'm up in Derry for the night, it's Northern Irish Villanelle. We're going universality. Mothers, go out and call your sons. They should not be out past the lamppost light. The streets are dead and the boys have come. When school days end and schoolboys run to fields for footballs and for fights, mothers, go out and call your sons. When the darkness comes in dripping sullen and you close the curtains for the night, the streets are dead and the boys have come. Does your table have a chair where some child has slipped out of your sight? Mothers, go out and call your sons. There's a canvas bag under the arm of a lad still learning wrong from right. The streets are dead and the boys have come. When the path is lined with tribal blood, then let love beat hate and hope beat spite. Mothers, go out and call your sons. The streets are dead and the boys have come. So Northern Ireland appears a lot in my poetry, even when I don't want it to. We're a bit like that as a country. So this one is meant to be a modern retelling of a Greek fable about Tithonus and Eos. Great love story, kind of ends in tragedy, as most love stories do. But it's really about Northern Ireland. And I couldn't stop it. So this is Tithonus. Eos. In the pictures you send, you're in the Maldives, snorkeling in bikinis with turtles. Your eyes are as blue as the waters in which you stand, clear and shimmering like insect wings. I have become like the lagoon in your absence, taken on its moods and movements, slow sludge of a river under history's weight. Eos, you're in Hawaii. Standing on Earth's fire, you swear you love me, and I plead you come to my arms. We can live cold and safe in rattling winds. You laugh, say lava travels slow. You're already safe without me. Eos, you're in Greece dancing with Dionysus and Eros. In Ballycastle, I cannot get the turf to light the fire. It's damp and dark without you. Eos, you've taken lovers in Chicago. You send me detailed notes about their beauty, each line a new wrinkle for my face. Eos, I am wizened without you. I am become great cliffs of mohair and Loch Ness, worn and deep, unyielding iconoclasts signifying nothing but age and isolation. From the heart's shell I burst forth, bow-legged metamorphosis of daydreams of you in Mount Sandal forest naked. I sing for you, sweet goddess, in cicada song. Eos, Eos, Eos. But your footprints travel on. Yeah. So that's a poem about love that kind of ends in tragedy. This one is really about love that is growing, is getting there. And it's called Gardener's Guide for the Hopeless, but it's not as sad as it sounds. Sorry. On our first phone call, we talked about flowers for hours until there were no plants left we could name. The process of growing, of noticing a bud half open, wondering if it would survive. I'll admit to being jealous of the orchid in your room, although I never was green-fingered. The way you breezed it in, allured by its brittleness. You described it to the root, until each freckled petal rose in my morning mind and settled in my slumber. I told you I had no favorite flower, but this is not strictly true. I like something that never dies, even after it's been long forgotten. I misplace so much of my time. It's easy to dismiss the living beauty by my telephone, unattended and wilting. We talked late into the evening. I remember I kept saying goodbye but never leaving, propagating new conversations from each offshoot. I often say goodbye and never mean it. An Irish farewell is a green thing too. It's another lie. They grow on me like moss with you. The truth is, I'm scared of the words blossoming on my tongue, invasive and prolific. I trim the end of each conversation 3 words short, but I feel it growing. A flower I cannot yet name, except to say the stems are tender and the fruit is hard to keep. Thanks. And I will clear off, but the last one is just a plug, a full-on plug. I'm shortlisted for the Bangor Poetry Competition, which you can vote on. This is the poem that is shortlisted, and it's about home, which is good because eventually I'll go there. So this is Nesting. Sorry, I really should title it. You want to believe it's yours. This geography, this blade of grass, this house your landlord owns, that you earned it. More than the drifting strangers that didn't clock in, that didn't come home to your dinner cold and your kids asleep. You want to believe your own wars brought glory, that you'll never have to run with just the shoes on your feet, the clothes on your back, the sweat on your brow you earned. You worked overtime for the weekend getaway, the kayak and the robin, the mistletoe for which you knelt at sermons. You can grasp Christmas like an envelope. You pay stamp duty. Outside, the wind is howling and the rain beats down, and the dinners are not cold but absent, and the kids do not sleep for all the rocking of the tide. All that was earned, lost. The building collapsed, the tree chopped, shelter now found in the tattered eaves of a nesting spot to rebuild in peace. When you leave your house at daybreak, joining a morning commute still scented with last night's rain, listen. Nearby, the robin's refrain is singing a lament from a tree you do not know. Her geography taken from no man's pocket, a nest, an earth, a home. Thank you very much.
No, wrong. I get confused easy. Okay, all right, we're back. Hello, thank you so much. Okay, so he started off the night and had the Culture Night Poetry Trail earlier on, various locations across the city. And so we're going to have him back. Frank Rafferty, get your bum up here and woo us with your words, man. Before you do, can I just, so we're going to use that mic. Is that okay? Yeah. I'm going to need to lie down in a darkened corner after this.
As Mel was saying, I've been doing quite a lot today. That's not the only excuse why I'm not going to be off the page. As I said earlier, I was out last night for a friend's 70th birthday, and to be honest, I went to bed about 3 o'clock this morning, and I was in here at 9, so I'll start and finish with a couple of poems that might be about trees. But you can judge yourself, but this might have to come up a wee bit for me. There we go. Is that better? Yeah. And it's great to follow 2 poets that I think are absolutely wonderful. I mean, I've known Abby, well, I know her like a bad penny, as some people say, but yes, she is. Yeah, I think she's a superb, wonderful talent. And I only first met Clare Allan a couple of weeks ago at Stendhal, and I was, I was blown away, I have to say, and rock bands never have this bother, do they? I should have a roadie doing this for me. Yeah. Right, there we go. Anyway, as I said, this is a wee thing called Being a Tree. I stood in the centre of the living room, just being a tree. I had first been a tree, aged 8 years old, Springburn Cooperative Hall. My 7 years old neighbour sang the Skyboat song sweetly. I was a tree filled with bile, self-loathing, disgust. I was a tree. 12 months later, on our street, my then 8 years old neighbour caught my vengeance full with his face during a game of rounders. Why there was a wicket keeper during our game of rounders was entirely due to my powers of persuasion. Why, some 50-odd years later, I am still just being a tree is quite frankly baffling, particularly for the neighbours who peer through my window from the street. Thank you. This is a wee one I wrote a few years ago. In the past 18 months or so has really sort of said why we should appreciate this thing that we take for granted. I wrote it for the 70th anniversary of the NHS. And basically it came about, I was reading a wee bit about Nye Bevan, the founder of the NHS. And he was a very loquacious man. Some would say quite verbose at times, used 25 words when one would suffice. But he was asked once in an interview, Mr. Bevan, what will a nationalised health service give the British people? And for once, he replied with one word, and it was serenity. And I thought, all right, okay, it's a good starting point. As I said, I might not be completely off the page tonight, but so if I'm glancing at that, don't worry. Right, it's called Your Health. My grandparents could barely breathe from tightening their belts. Is it hard now to imagine all the terror that they felt each time that they or one of theirs was sick or taken ill? Could they afford the medicine, a £2 doctor's bill? You grant me the serenity which they had never known. From their collective will you sprang, completely ours, homegrown. My dad's sister, Patricia, she was the aunt we'd never meet, 'cause back then pneumonia could bring a funeral to your street. But no magic spell did summon you. You were our own creation. You were demanded, and out you came from post-war devastation. You embody love for everyone. And still we understate your true value and your worth to us since 1948. You grant me that serenity which they had never known. From their collective will you sprang, completely ours, homegrown. If and when we can, We pay so that if and when there's need, by her, by me, by neighbours, strangers, friends, you'll intercede with doctors, nurses, hospitals, new treatments for our pain. You act as salve and balm if we are wounded or insane. We'll never know, because of you, the fear people once felt. Poor people who could barely breathe from tightening the belt. You grant me that serenity, which they had never known. From their collective will, you sprang, completely ours, homegrown. Thanks. Because of the day that's in it, I'll find this in a wee minute, but I only did this once. A couple of years ago, there was a walk, march, call it what you will, from Belfast to Derry, and it ended in the Guildhall Square. And it was people that were marching or walking because a young woman, a young journalist in this town had been killed. So I was emceeing. I think I stepped in for you that day, aye. And so I wrote that this next poem that morning, and I don't think I've actually done it since. So it was, I don't even think it's got a name really. I think it's just called Lyra. We cannot accept the damage which is your promise to our kids. We will not go back in time to bombs and banging dustbin lids. Take away your Jackanory. We demand a better story, not in her name, not in our name. We've had enough. You might think you're God Almighty and the Lord of your estate. You may think that there's a future only your kind can create. But hear what we are saying. This is our future you're betraying. Not in her name, not in my name. We've had enough. We'll no stand for your brutality. No more boys with blown out knees. We'll no appease your criminality. We're standing here for peace. We know exactly where you hide, and we insist you step aside. Not in her name, not in our name. We've had enough. You may no fear us yet, but listen to the ever-growing throng. At first we'll just be hundreds, then we're hundreds of thousands strong. And today you'll hear our voices. We're all making different choices, not in her name, not in our name. We've had enough. And to you, our politicians, who are all so highly skilled, when you leave nothing but a vacuum can be filled. If you can't agree to make decisions, you deserve nothing but derision. Not in her name, not in our name. We've had enough. And all of you today here standing with your families, lovers, friends, raise your voices to the heavens. Tell them all to make amends. We'll love and live with whom we choose. We'll talk in tongues we'll never lose. We've had enough. Not in her name, not in our name. Okay? All right. Hey, I really don't know what I'm doing up here half the time, so I'll find something else to do now. Right, somebody did a love one earlier. I'll do that, and I'll do this wee one first, yes. Again, I need to look at it. That's a bit daft. Why do you need to look at that? It's very short. Well, my brain's not working properly, that's why. This is just called That. See, when that wee Wayne looks at you because you asked it something stupid, like that time that you looked at that drawing and said, "What's that you've drawn there?" See that look of utter contempt on that wee Wayne's face? You needed to see that. You need to know that you've got no imagination. And that look that wee Wayne had on that wee face that said, "Are you that stupid?" You deserved that. Okay. I don't know how long we've got, really. Right, so I don't know how long I've been up here now. I'll do this wee one, and then I'll go back to another one about trees, or is it? I suppose this is a love poem. It's one of those that the bits of things float about with you for years, if you write at all, and they're just bits. And then someday you actually meet somebody, and other bits come, and it's all sort of all starts to make some kind of weird sense. It's called Do Not Belong to Others. Do not belong to others, for none belong to you. Possession is not virtue, just the turning of a screw, or those dispossessed possessions spent and broken on the rack. Do not belong to others. They may not give you back. And does it ever really matter if it's me, you, her, or him who becomes someone's possession, is disposed of on a whim? A darker still scenario for her, him, me, or you is to become someone's possessor. Do I belong to you? Do I belong to you now? Do you belong to me? Is this what I have longed for? To give someone the key to understand me, totally accept without complaint, to give to that one other my whole self without restraint, abandoned to that moment when another makes me live, when against all wiser judgment I can do now else but give all my love, head, heart, body, to this single other soul, to unite in the divisions of ourselves and make us whole. But there's still these siren voices. Hear their claims, ask, are they true? Do not belong to others, for none belong to you. Do not be led by instinct, love, emotion you can feel. Kneel before each endless reason for denying what is real. Break the heart, destroy the spirit, kill your passion, murder rage, purge all memory of loving. Build yourself a better cage. Try to wriggle out a living, climb the scaffold, bend the knee. But do not belong to others. They may never set you free. Free to feel nothing for no one. Free to gasp the truth of Zen, free to mutter through the madnesses in the minds of many men, how you're free of fruitless passion, how you've crucified inside, how your science, your gods, your reason have all been verified. I don't want such understanding. I don't need to live alone. I know we all are anyhow, from belly back to bone. I just need your heartfelt laughter. I want your body next to mine. Belonging to another is the only human sign. Back to this, that same old story, told and telling, always true. I may not belong to others, but I will belong to you. Right, okay. Cheers. It is a love poem. So as I said, I'd finish with one about a tree, so it's sort of like that. If I can just find it. Yes, I do need my specs on for this. Right. I'll actually hold it up because I am going to read this completely off this. It's called Past Lives. Remembering my past lives can be quite funny. All those times when I was them and never me. I've never been an aristocrat or a foreign doctor, but there are many lives I've lived being a tree. They'll always talk of channeling past lives as a human. Witches, bankers, criminals, kings and thieves. It's all accents, sex, demeanour, occupation. They never talk about the bark or nuts or leaves. They never mention wildlife, rot or rodents or loud birds nesting. They'll no discuss that crazy woodsman with his axe, or being the prop from which they're found sometimes, just hanging. You'll no find that outlined in the Past Lives Book of Facts. It's always fascinating adventures abroad as someone other than who you are, a duchess or a lord, a criminal mastermind, a one-legged highwaywoman, or some dude who invented guns or sharpened swords. They won't even whisper they've been felled deep in the forest. They don't talk of being chopped up to make a chair. There's a lot more to most past lives than being a human. Know that many, if any, of you shallow creatures care. But at least when I was a tree, life was unhurried. I was out there in nature, firmly rooted, free. What's the reason why such lives are lived unworried? Well, there is no eye nor mind to think with, being a tree. And that's why remembering all of my past lives can be funny. When I talk of them as if there's something being missed. My past lives, tree or human, just like yours are things imagined only. They never did exist. Cheers.
The mic kerfuffle begins again. No. You're all right. It is mine. I know, I've been keeping an eye on it all night. All night. Okay, so yeah. When your pages have been like tucked up in a book for so long, you just like get creases in them. Isn't that something? Thank you so much, Frank, for that. I'm going to end the performances. Do we have anybody here that was for the open mic? Did anybody hang on? No? Awesome. Just because we've run over time. So I didn't want to go, you've only got like 3 minutes. Slam rules. Okay, so I'm going to kick off with a piece that I love it. It's a piece that kind of like sets the stage for this is what to expect from me as a performer, as an artist. It's called Outspoken because I am. Artists, to my mind, are the architects of change and not the political legislators who implement change after the fact. William S. Burroughs. I love this statement, but it's not without flaws. If artists are the architects of change, how can change exist? If the architects and the implementers are both identical, if the only voices being heard are speaking in the same tongue as those of the ears that are listening, how do we make room for other? When the only artists that are taken seriously are straight, white, cisgendered, able-bodied men, does the architecture actually show the things that need transformed? When the only time that women are seen or heard are as plot device or muse to drive the stories of men, when do we have space to tell our own? A student once asked me, do you know all these feminists getting angry about manspreading? Do you not think they should be worrying about more important stuff? It got me thinking, because things are never that simple. See, when a man takes up that space, he's not just taking up that space on a bus. He's telling every single woman around him, be small. Be quiet. Be unseen. Because if you're seen and heard, well, you're asking for attention. And that kind of attention only seeks out a conflict in the positions of power. When the sources of information that shape young minds are sending out mixed messages, when and where do we draw the line? Too much makeup or not enough. Don't over-sexualize yourself. But too much modesty, well, there's no need to completely cover up. Fat girl needs a makeover. She needs to find a way to love herself. Skinny girl needs a good feed, probably an eating disorder. Can't be anything else. Body hair. She must be one of those crazy hippie pixie loons. All no bra and peppermint tea. A man bunch. Sure, they all live in communes. Introverted girls who read books. And indie girls sporting geek looks, goth girls with piercings and tattoos, t-shirts and jeans girls in bloke shoes. They are the kind of girls that don't fit the paint by numbers design, that won't prescribe to that won't conform to the prescribed ideal of the perfect woman shrine. The world needs dangerous women, the gutsy, outspoken kind, the ones who talk about masturbation and orgasms in public and will not be confined. They don't care if you think they're bossy, argumentative and opinionated. They're on a mission, loudspeaker in hand, to show the world this system is outdated. To all you future women writers, young girls in bedrooms crafting poetry, struggling to place emotions felt too big to fit inside oneself, responding to an often ugly world lost in transition. To those women who say they'd love to put pen to paper and write their thoughts, harbouring desires, dreams and summaries of plots steeped in self-doubt, shunning notions of leaving behind their comfortable mission. To those women who say they'd never be brave enough to share their secret scribbles, kept in hidden notebooks that no one ever sees, censoring the world from their thoughts and their thoughts from ambition. I dare you. Take that stand, swallow hard, breathe deep, and venture into those unknown lands. If artists are the architects of change, paint, write, dance, be more than, because I am damned if the only voice being heard will be that of a man. Thank you. It's a good intro. Okay, so this piece, I struggle with OCD, and this piece was written to detail sort of those struggles. It's called Conversations with Brain. It's 3 a.m, and my brain has just woken me up because it wants to talk about shit that will not wait. These conversations are pretty formulaic and usually include the introduction from Brain. I was thinking. This is quickly followed by a to and fro exchange of me threatening to pull the covers over my head and Brain threatening to sing the Henry VIII song from the movie Ghost. Then comes the suggestion that I should probably put the light on and write this down because I'll forget. And in the morning, I'll be kicking myself because it is such a great line. And after I've tried sticking my fingers in my ear and hiding under the duvet, I relent because I know I won't win. These days, it's usually about poetry. I'm Bray getting excited because it has just worked out the exact intonation to put on the right word that will not only change how I present the poem, but my entire understanding of what I've written. And occasionally words scratch at the inside of my skull and make me uncomfortable until I give in and write them down. Secretly, I love it, but don't tell Brain that. These conversations were not always so constructive. These conversations were not always so welcomed. And these conversations were not always so healthy. Sometimes Brian would give me a sharp jolt in the middle of the night, a crushing pain to let me know that that smell that was in the kitchen 3 hours ago was probably something disgusting enough. If I leave it until the morning, it'll permeate its way up through the house and I'll wake up choking on it, that my only option is to get up and clean. Sometimes it would scream as I tried to remain calm in the front seat of a taxi, going the wrong way, high-pitched, freaking out in the back of my head because this is not our normal route home, that the taxi driver is taking away all of my control, that I am completely helpless, that the taxi driver is deliberately fucking with me. Sometimes it has a French accent. But that's usually when we see magpies. And whilst we try hard to convince each other that we're not superstitious because that's just stupid, we know that if we don't say, Bonjour, Monsieur Magpie, où est ta femme aujourd'hui? We'll look back later that night at the disaster that happened and we'll convince ourselves that it was the magpie's fault. And then there was that one time. I say one time, it was more like 6 times, when we talked for months about our own mortality and how high up we'd need to be to fall and not survive. And would we have that feeling of euphoria flying through the air before the impact of hitting the ground? We decided firmly that we are too cowardly to try out drowning. And in the end, collecting pills was always easiest. I can never work out if it was me or Brain that made the purchase. But I can tell you how horrible it was there in that hospital bed. The silence, stuck on a drip, not talking to each other because we couldn't work out who was to blame. And sometimes these conversations, even about the bad stuff, haven't always been so bad. And I'm glad that Brain has an element of rationale to talk me down. I do not cope too well with emotions. And Brain is now used to my little ways. So when my daughter at 12 wanted to hold my hand, I was grateful that Brain was there to fight with my inner desire to throw up or pass out or both. She's now 20. And I still get that voice in my head telling me, it's okay. She's 20 and still wants to hold your hand in public. Thank you. Okay, so given that the sound man is also my lover and is wonderful and has been working flat out, he's also my code monkey, and has been working flat out for me for the last, I don't know, how long? Well, anyway, we haven't had any sleep for days. Nearly 4 years. Thank you. We haven't had any sleep for days. But this one will make him squirm, so I'm doing it. It's called Kissing You. Ever think about the magic stuff that happens when 2 people come together and kiss? It's a whole crazy field of neuroreceptors firing off and chemicals being released, not to mention the smells and the tastes, the intricacies of how we learn about each other. A kiss, it's never just a kiss. It's the soft embrace of days not seen, the intake of breath, the pause, mouth dry, but mouth dry, throat tight, but I want to swallow. Suspended heartbeat, time stops, fingertips that find fingertips and speak silently in their own language. It's the moment waited for after a long day, and the heat and proximity of your body next to mine, the inhale, exhale of your breath to my breath, and somehow we can sustain each other for the eternity that is those 2 or 3 minutes. It's the switch that turns off all my thoughts. Silence is the cacophony of voices that battle in my head. They're all as dumbstruck with fuzziness over you as I am. It's one of the very few things we agree unanimously on. You make us all smile. It's hands cupped on face, palms to cheek, nose to nose, and lips that find each other. Bottom brushed against top, top against bottom. Inhale, exhale, limbs, searching for limbs, body pressed against body, seeking contact with other. Never rushed, only savoured. It's our version of, how was your day, dear? And truth be told, I'm still in shock that I have a dear to ask, that I have a you to ask, that I have a you to kiss and touch and hold, and the safest place in the whole wide world is here, in your arms. Sometimes I like to kiss you with my eyes open, I love that. I love to see the way every single muscle in your face has relaxed and all the worries that you carry there have disappeared, melted, evaporated from the warmth of us, and my kisses become mingled with smiles. I like to kiss you with my eyes open because I love that little O shape that you make with your mouth, and I get to see if it's your hair or my hair that is flopped down and is trying to tickle my nose. I like to kiss you with my eyes open because I still can't believe that you're here, and I don't want to miss out on a single second of seeing you. I want to commit your face to memory so I never forget how you look. I like to kiss you with my eyes open because I love the way our souls connect. I want to let my pupils dilate to take in as much of you as I possibly can. Sometimes I like to kiss you with my eyes open because sometimes you do too. Thank you. And I finished with one. Just given that, Mary, her app, the whole journey stuff has been exhausting, but it's been lovely. Anyway, Abby, this one was inspired by you. And it was a conversation that we had when we were working on your show. And you said to me, the line that's replaced, the refrain that's in this, sometimes the story will find you. And this is called Sometimes the Story Will Find You. I love the idea of kitchen table philosophy, the absolute wonder in women sharing their stories, creating magic, breaking bread, finding extraordinary in our seemingly mundane, claiming space to ensure our rich threads in this tapestry of life do not fade in colour, forgotten. I heard a friend say once, sometimes the story will find you. I wanted to learn the stories at the heart of Irish women. Some women I knew and loved, some I had yet to meet, and this one woman who kept appearing relentlessly on rural roads, in odd little nooks, passing cemeteries, housing estates, at the bottom of strangers' gardens, on mountain roads, in people's houses, a ghostly figure in white and blue. I heard a friend say once, sometimes the story will find you. I wanted to know what she had to say. I wanted to know her through the stories of the women of this island. Their relationships appeared inextricably linked. I heard a friend say once, sometimes the story will find you. I thought my journey began by Muckish Mountain, there in that little inlay in the road where we stopped in darkness, seatbelt off, and offered a little kiss to that lady in grey. The Bridge of Tears not far behind us. I didn't know then about all those who had to say goodbye to loved ones for the chance of a better life. Here, in the gap, a place to stop, reflect, catch breath, and pray. I heard a friend say once, sometimes the story will find you. We spent a few weeks one summer driving through Ireland, exploring places I'd never seen alone on a bus. Over and over again, there she was, in random places. Hidden shrines on dangerous road bends, curiosity sparkled in my brain. We ventured to Galway on that mystery tour, stayed in a small cottage just outside a small town, still reeling from the countless violations perpetrated against innumerable young mothers, babies buried, lost in time. We sat in the car eating breakfast beside a rustic and ramshackle shrine, paint chipping, plastic flowers faded, weathered, conjuring ideas to explore this phenomenon further. What began as joking irreverence quickly turned to an idea that demanded more than my imagination could ever have conceived. I heard a friend say once, sometimes the story will find you. I petitioned eagerly women I knew, reached out through networks without expectation, and listened. We talked together, shared ideas and our lives, with each a new concept that shaped the next, like devotional petitions, scribbled on tiny scraps of paper, rolled up tight and tucked in the gaps between rocks. These stories of womanhood and Mary had become discreetly out of sight. I heard a friend say once, sometimes the story will find you. Childhood memories of confusion, not whistling lest Our Lady be offended. First communion dresses, and oh, the fuss. hoping to be picked for special processions to wear it one more time, wanting to be thought somehow good enough. Lofty the heights of a virgin unattainable. Then motherhood, dehumanized in submission or carrying the eternal shame of not wanting it to be the only choice. Inability to reconcile perfection, immaculate. The horror of the women who'd walked these paths before us are around us and those who have yet to come. I heard a friend say once, sometimes the story will find you. Devotional stories of finding strength, loving faith and comfort, adoration of this sacred feminine affinity with a relatable deity to petition in anguish and despair. These are a softer side to this male-driven religion. These stories gathered were shared through laughter, tears and anger, empathetic sorority, connected histories, redress, sought in love. I heard a friend say once, sometimes this story will find you. We talked of institutions and hush practices, silenced no more. We talked of her womanhood and how we identified with her lack of agency, the choice she had the suffering she had no choice to accept, and how that must have felt. My journey to finding this woman showed me much of my own self. As mother, I wanted to tell her there's no shame in tears. Understanding the anguish felt to be there for your child from first to last breath. I wanted to let her know that I see that humanity, despite being clothed in those heavy white and blue robes. I heard a friend say once, sometimes the story will find you. Thank you so much. I know. Bye, Abby. Listen, thanks to everybody for coming tonight, and thank you, Sue, for going, I have this idea. I love it whenever I have this idea happens. Thank you to anybody that has watched and anybody that will catch up on this later. And yeah, that's us. And to the sound man, can everybody give, please, a big round of applause? He's very tired. Very tired. Thank you. That's us. We out.